We are off to the races again. Futures pointing to new record highs as the 10-year Treasury comes below 4%. 30 minutes until the start of trading. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Dani Berger. Bloomberg Open Interest starts right now.
Coming up, a big chip deal. Nvidia makes a $5 billion bet on Intel. A surprising move to help prop up its ailing arch rival. Intel shares soar on the news.
And that deal helps further a rally in stocks as the Fed delivers its first cut of the year and signals more to come.
This hour, President Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer hold a joint press conference at which more tech investments may be announced.
Matt, we have to start there because the move in Intel, it is a monster one this morning. How many times have we been head faked from Intel? Does it stick this morning? Nvidia agreeing to invest $5 billion in the company, said that the two will co-develop chips for PCs and data centers. Nvidia's stake in Intel will be just under 5%, so 2.5 rally for Nvidia. For Intel, it's a 30.3% rally.
Anybody who got on board with Trump after that investment in August is getting paid today. Novo Nordisk's diabetes drug Ozempic beat Eli Lilly's Trulicity in a real-world survey of certain U.S. patients. Participants who took Ozempic were 23% less likely to have a heart attack, stroke, or die than people who took Trulicity. According to Novo Nordisk, you can see Novo shares up 8% this morning in the pre-market. Dani?
All right, let's get back to the big story this morning, and it is the Nvidia-Intel deal. Bloomberg Tech co-host Caroline Hyde joins us for more on this. Caroline, it's $5 billion. What exactly are they hoping to achieve with this investment?
It's more about integration. It's about the forward-looking focus of Intel and its relevance here in the United States. So it's about not yet its fabrication of chips. Remember, TSMC is a little bit lower, but this isn't like a wipeout in terms of Intel making Nvidia's chips. This is about Nvidia and them aligning when it comes to AI PCs, when it comes to the future of gaming, when it comes to just making sure that Intel is more relevant in AI data centers, because thus far it hasn't been. Nvidia, it solidifies its position within the future of AI, whether it's you're using, of course, Intel's own architecture, but also whether you're having companies like Alphabet and others actually design their own specific chips. It just makes them a little bit more relevant into the direction of travel and the future of AI accelerators. It really makes their software and their hardware ever more baked in to the ecosystem when you're aligning with Intel. But this is basically a political statement. This is Nvidia getting on board with what Trump and the US administration needs. A homegrown domestic powerhouse that needed financial aid, so they get the $5 billion. Maybe this does signal eventually that Intel can think more about fabrication because it's got clear eventual demand maybe coming from Nvidia, but that's not the one yet. What it's a big tell is that AMD is hurting bad. You're seeing AMD lower because Nvidia could have done this sort of a deal with AMD. It makes CPUs, it's relevant in gaming, but instead it's gone with Intel because that is where the political winds have been blowing. Big day for AMD. Also look out at ARM because its own architecture is becoming ever more relevant in data centers. Maybe it gets set back a bit because Intel is once there again with x86.
By the way, also a reminder, when President Trump makes an investment or tells you to buy stocks, maybe you should think about getting on board. In terms of Nvidia, Huawei is coming out with a challenger chip. We talked about Broadcom challenging Blackwell in the past. Is anybody else going to be able to do what Nvidia does?
Not for several years. And this is Huawei trying to make clear that eventually it's going to be able to beef up its manufacturing, meet some sort of supply that is just an outrageous amount of demand coming from China at the moment. And at the moment, the Chinese regulators do not want their powerhouses of Alibaba and Tencent buying from Nvidia. They want them to go to Huawei. They want them to depend on Ascend. But thus far, they haven't had the chip equipment. They haven't got the infrastructure to make really sophisticated chips, let alone the designs thus far. And so they've had to go to Nvidia. But if Huawei can signal that they're doing more with their lesser semiconductors, they're basically going to be grouping them all together, getting a super pod, basically these clusters that we're used to in the United States. They can make them ever more efficient. Then maybe they can do without Nvidia for the time being. Maybe they can really make strides in generative AI models for their big clients, and it becomes ever more self-sufficient. This is potentially would have been a negative day for Nvidia, but instead they've managed to write their own course with the Intel news.
Yeah, interesting to be up and chip at your own monopoly. Very interesting dynamic. Caroline, thank you so much. Bloomberg Tech's Caroline Hyde. By the way, Matt, We were talking in the break about how much $5 billion is for Nvidia. MODL, the function you told me to go to, their cash on the balance sheet last quarter was $84 billion. So $5 billion is almost a drop in the bucket for Nvidia.
It's a very small amount, obviously also for a company that's currently worth $4.1 trillion.
Yes, correct. Yes, so that gives you some context into how much this investment really is. Now, the other big story, Matt, of course, is what happened yesterday. The Federal Reserve lowering its benchmark interest rate by 0.25 percentage point and penciling in 2 more reductions for this year. Fed Chair Powell explained why there was not a larger rate cut yesterday.
There wasn't widespread support at all for a 50 basis point cut today. You know, I think we've done very large rate hikes and very large rate cuts in the last 5 years, and you tend to do those at a time when you feel that policy is out of place and needs to move quickly to a new place. That's not at all what I feel certainly now. I feel like our policy has been doing the right thing so far this year.
Joining us now is Michael McKee, Bloomberg's international economics and policy correspondent. Mike, just judging by what Powell said in the presser, meeting by meeting situation, it's a risk management cut. We have two-sided risks. Is this a Powell who is trying to push back on the idea that this really is the start of a rate cutting cycle?
Yes, but he's not trying to push people into the idea that it's not either. Basically, as he said, risk management. The Fed doesn't know what's going on with the economy. And so at this point, they thought it would probably be prudent to do one cut. If you look at basically the charts of what's happening with their two mandates, they're both going in the wrong direction. Unemployment is rising and prices are also rising again. But prices have been coming down, certainly from where they were. And they think the risk going forward is more towards fewer people being employed, and that means less money going into the economy, slows it down, which would also push down inflation. So that's the direction they're going in at the moment. That is, as I put it yesterday, that's the story they're telling, and they're not necessarily going to stick to it because they're going to watch what the data do. Latest data out today are somewhat reassuring. We get the Philadelphia Fed number jumping on the month, 23.2 from a negative number in July. The prices paid index dropped significantly to 46.8, but it's important to note that is because fewer companies reported changes in prices. They're still reporting that prices are going up. They're not reporting that prices are going down, but a lot of them held their prices steady. Jobless claims fall back. We saw an apparent spike in fraudulent claims in Texas last week. That goes away, and the jobless claims numbers have gone back down. That was something that scared a lot of people last week, and it doesn't seem something to worry about. But right now, we're going to keep an eye on the data going forward if we don't get a government shutdown that doesn't get us the data. But October 3rd is the jobs report, and that's the first one that gives us any kind of clue as to where we go from here.
I wonder about, we have not been back down to the Fed's inflation target for over 5 years, right? And we're cutting. Stephen Myron just earlier this month forecast 4% GDP growth in 2027, and I believe that's his dot at the very bottom in 2027 at 2.375%.
That is his dot, yes.
Is this like what they teach them at Harvard these days?
I don't think so. And I don't think there is necessarily an intellectual connection between what he told the summary of economic projections and what he may think in his head. He was sent there to do a job for the president, and he did it, putting that dot that low.
But, Mike, they're all doing it, right? As Dani points out, the summary of economic forecasts or economic projections has higher GDP growth, lower unemployment, and yet they're cutting.
But remember, the summary of economic, what we're looking at is the median. And when you look at the growth figures, the range rose, which means somebody gave a higher number. So that could have been Steve Myron as well. We also don't know about Anna Paulson, who's the new Philadelphia Fed president, who just put in her first SEP this month. But it could mean that Myron did say we're getting stronger growth because he's supposed to say that.
All right, Mike, thanks very much. We're going to continue, obviously, to talk about this for at least the next 2 hours, if not, the next 2 months. Mike McKee there is our international policy and economics correspondent. Joining us now at the desk is Meredith Whitney. She is the CEO of the Meredith Whitney Advisory Group. And Meredith, great to get your take on a day like today. We're running towards all new highs on stocks, as we have been, most of the days this year. But we now have the 10-year yield below 4%. What do you think about this market into which the Fed is cutting?
I expected this to be a really hard environment for the Fed going into this year, because I see inflation in a lot of sectors. They're not coming out in the hard data, but everybody anecdotally feels the inflation, and particularly services, particularly insurance, homeowners insurance, auto insurance, things that really sting. So, as an example, homeowners insurance is up over 69% in 5 years, and that's only going to rise with replacement costs, as auto sector you know very well. And then the employment environment is really tough. So the areas where employment's coming out of the system are hospitality, leisure. That's where spending is really contracted, and the persistent grower within the employment situation is home health care aides, because we have the silver tsunami of an aging population, and more people are staying in their homes, and more people are having home health care. There's not enough to. There's a real employment crisis in that sector.
Meredith, why is everybody so sanguine on inflation when the price increases are just jaw-dropping, eye-popping?
Yeah.
I mean, I look at auto prices, and it's shocking how much they've increased, no matter if you're looking at domestics or foreign over the last 2 or 3 years.
I think because in the hard data, you don't see it in the aggregate numbers. So people are brushing over it, and there's the fear of missing out on a market that just keeps going higher.
Well, that's the thing. There's this weird dichotomy between consumption and the equity market looking incredibly strong, while you have a labor market and housing markets, to your point, that are looking more weak. Which of the two is a better forward-leading indicator for where we go?
It's tough, because I think this environment looks nothing like any environment I've seen before, housing market specifically. So the housing market is on track to be the slowest housing market in over 25 years. And that's because seniors own the vast majority of homes, and they're staying put. So the housing market's stuck. That has an impact on the economy, because if people aren't moving, they're not buying new furniture sets, they're not spending a bunch at Lowe's and Home Depot, and that has an impact on the economy. And then you have other segments where the high end continues to spend, but then there's the rest of the economy, which is 52% of households are still living paycheck to paycheck. And I think another factor that I focused on more recently is what's going on with folks that are between 24 and 38. I call that the avocado toast generation. So it's a mix between older Gen Zs and younger millennials. Now they're being stung. They owe 50% of student debt, and the Department of Education in August started wage garnishments. So already student debt has an 11% serious default, meaning 90-plus day default rate, and I think it's going to be much higher on the.
That bears repeating. More than 1 in 10 people with student loans haven't paid for more than 3 months.
For more than 3 months. But remember, people didn't pay. There was a forbearance period for almost 5 years,
In which they should have saved up maybe to get ready for this
maybe,
point.
but they're totally unprepared. So people are like, I'm not paying. I'm not paying. So only the rubber met the road in October 24. So we really only have a very short period of time, under a year, where people actually had to make payments. So there was an on-ramp period, but really the rubber met the road in October 24. I think that's going to put a sting on the economy as well. And a lot of these people are losing their jobs, don't have jobs, and that pressure takes, by my estimates, a wage garnishment can take 15% of your earnings. Right? So instead of making a payment around $200, $300, it can go up to $700 being taken out of your paycheck. That stings. So there are a lot of things that are coming into the economy that are going to test the consumer spending. I don't expect any impact from, again, the very high end, but from the sort of the edge, the folks that paid a lot on experience. This is the avocado toast guys that power the economy. American Express, that's been one of their biggest drivers of growth, which is this millennial and Gen Z. That's going to be something to watch over the coming months.
All right, Meredith, we have to talk more about this. You're staying with us. That is Meredith, Whitney, and Matt, just quickly, some breaking lines to bring us. Sumitomo Mitsui is in talks to raise its Jefferies stake above 15%. It already had an investment in the U.S. bank. I will just say, not necessarily this is the reason behind it, but we are in this period. foreign companies making more investments in the U.S. How much of this is financial and how much of this is Japanese companies and Japan as a whole trying to catch the attention of this White House?
Hey, Dani, this is the hottest country in the world.
I mean, it is. It is, to be fair, and financials are on fire, too, so why wouldn't you want a piece?
Speaking of, we await President Trump's press conference with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. We'll bring you that when it happens. This is Bloomberg Open Interest. Let's get now to high interest. Look at what's making headlines around the world. Disney's ABC network is taking Jimmy Kimmel's late night show off the air indefinitely. This after a backlash over his recent comments regarding the killing of Republican activist Charlie Kirk.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Yesterday, FCC Chair Brendan Carr said the agency has a strong case to punish Kimmel, ABC, and Disney. The FCC grants licenses to broadcasters such as ABC. And by the way, in the past, Carr has championed free speech, especially in terms of political satire. But he's not laughing now. Tesla is reworking its door handles after safety complaints and a federal probe. The new design would combine the electronic and manual release into one single button, making it easier to escape in an emergency. I spoke with Tesla's chief designer Franz von Holzhausen yesterday about the changes.
We actually have a mechanical release that's, basically right at the electronic one too, and we're combining the two. So, in the moment that you're in a panic situation, the muscle memory to go to, what is right there. So you just pull a little bit further on the lever and you have the mechanical release. So that's something that we're working on, yeah. And it's in the cars now.
And Meta is taking yet another stab at smart glasses at its annual Connect event. Mark Zuckerberg unveiled the new $799 Ray-Ban display, the first with a built-in screen. It shows text, calls, and visual results from queries to its AI service, all controlled with hand gestures that are detected by a neural wristband, whatever that is. The new glasses will go on sale September 30th. By the way, speaking of stuff you can buy, American Express is hiking the Platinum Card fee to $895. It's an increase of $200. To ease the sting, Amex is adding about $1,500 in perks, $400 in dining credits, $300 at Lululemon, $200 towards Aura rings, plus richer hotel and Uber benefits if you pay for that stuff over their network, obviously. The 29% fee increase catapults Amex Platinum back to the top rung of premium credit card prices, eclipsing the price for JP Morgan's Sapphire Reserve card. Dani?
Who's asking for this stuff? Who is I need $400 at Lululemon and an Aura ring? That's such a specific person.
I feel like if you don't already have an Aura ring, maybe you don't want one, but who knows?
Probably. Well, if you have the Amex, you have to now to justify it. All right. Still with us is Meredith Whitney, CEO of Meredith Whitney Advisory Group. Meredith, we were just talking about the break how, yes, this risk market, equities are an all-time high, but credit spreads are so incredibly tight, too. Still the tightest since the 1990s. I was talking with a private capital executive who basically said to me that there is so much demand from credit coming from so many different corners of this market that you will essentially never see credit spreads widen again. Do you think that that's right?
I don't know about that, but I can tell you one of the themes we've been focusing on for the past year plus has been this tidal wave of demand from private credit on consumer assets. And so you've seen consumer stocks like Rocket and SoFi and Upstart, particularly SoFi, has turned itself into an originate and sell model. So they cannot produce enough product for private credit. A company that just came public, Figure Technology, sells 60% of its production to private credit. So you have there's not enough consumer loan production to meet private credit. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Private credit doesn't want short-term assets like credit card assets. They want long-term assets like home equity loans, mortgages, et cetera. So you have seen an incredible change, 17-year change in home equity. So last summer, home equity went from shrinking for 17 years to growing, and that has been explosive. Rocket Financial has securitized 85% more year to date in terms of closed-end securitization home equity loans than it did last year. And interestingly, older seniors are taking out 41% of the home equity loans. So home equity is the fastest growing loan category, and seniors are the fastest at taking out home equity. And this means seniors can afford to stay in their homes. Most seniors, I think Redfin said 79% of seniors want to stay in their home, age in place, which is different from years past. And they're able to afford it thanks to private credit.
By the way, I will borrow a lot more when I'm super old also. I got to ask you about munis. You made your name in this sector, and there is concern still about huge pension obligations for a lot of states in this country, even at tight spreads. Are you concerned about munis? Are you concerned about any states in particular?
You know, for the states why I looked at munis in the first place was because the states were going to have to make some really difficult choices. Constitutionally, municipals were guaranteed and pensions were guaranteed, but social services weren't guaranteed. And so I thought that the states would do the right thing. I was clearly wrong, because what the states did was they kept spending on pension funds, and they used a lot of the Obama stimulus to pad their pensions and their municipal debt. But the fact is they cut on social services. So you've seen massive state arbitrage. So you've seen Texas and Florida far outgrow states like New York and Connecticut, et cetera. And so that's what has happened. And so
to some extent, Meredith, the federal government chipped in to pay a lot of those social services, and now is going to pull out. So states are left on the hook for a lot of that bill. Are they in for a reckoning now?
I mean, it depends how friendly municipal investors are. So, it's tough to tell. I've taken a step away from it. I certainly look at which states are more powerful in terms of growth engines. And New York is going to be in a tough position. California continues to be in a tough position.
Doesn't this also just reflect the bigger federal deficit too, and the issues we're having, but yet investors who aren't pushing back against it, the vigilantes that have disappeared?
Well, states are constitutionally, except for Vermont, 49 states are constitutionally required to have balanced budgets. This is why I focused on the states, also because the data is so much more granular with the states. The U.S. can keep spending until it decides that investors don't want to buy their debt anymore. But clearly investors are continuing to buy 30-year, 10-year. They're continuing to be supportive of the market. And I think more U.S. and foreign investors are continuing to buy. So least dirty shirt.
There's a ton of demand out there. Meredith, great having you, and I hope you come back soon. Meredith Whitney joining us here on set. Let's take a look at futures. We're 5 minutes or less until the open right now, and we're still looking at some decent gains, 0.4% on S&P futures, NASDAQ futures even higher after that Nvidia Intel deal. You can see there, and Nvidia and Intel are here. 2.5% makes a big difference on the indexes in which it's incredibly heavily weighted. Then Intel, the gain almost 30% still in the pre-market. I should point out that I'm always watching yields on treasuries right now, and we've been on 4% watch. Right now, we're back up on the 10-year yield to 4.116, but we came below it.
4. Yeah. But see, this is the crazy thing, that you can get yields ending up higher than they were before the Fed decision, and stocks still rocketing higher. Stocks still trading near all-time highs. It is a market that is split, and at some points, higher bond yields seem to upset equities, but we are so far from that.
It is pretty incredible that yields went from basically 4 flat at 8 o'clock this morning up to 4.12.
It speaks to the confusion of the Fed decision yesterday.
Absolutely. We're going to come back and talk about that. This is Bloomberg Open Interest. Moments away from the start of trading, this is Bloomberg Open Interest. I'm Matt Miller. The day after a Fed decision, we saw the 10-year yield go below 4%. Now it comes rocketing back like 12 basis points, but that doesn't stop us from rallying. Futures on the S&P up 0.4%, on the Nasdaq up almost 0.9%. And one of the big catalysts is this Nvidia Intel deal that's pushing especially tech stocks higher. A couple of new participants ringing opening bells down on the New York Stock Exchange. You've got Waterbridge, WBI, the ticker there, and the latest IPO on the Nasdaq is Netscope, which is surprisingly a lot like the internet web browser that I first learned on.
Which is
Netscape.
Oh, that's very
Right?
confusing. That is very confusing. But hey, IPOs
But no
are
one
back,
remembers
baby.
that because that was like 30 years ago.
Well, I mean, it's kind of worrying, a sign of the times. 30 years ago, things happened. IPOs are coming back. You know how that goes.
Enron.
Enron will go beyond that right now. Matt, I have something that is moving the market. It's clear you're talking about 4% on the 10-year yields moving much higher. It's not the Fed dominating markets. That's not what's driving things. It is this. Look at the share price of Intel, 25% gain. After Nvidia agreed to invest $5 billion in the company, it said the two will co-develop chips for PCs and data centers. Nvidia's stake, though, Matt, in Intel will be just under 5%. I mean, I know $5 billion sounds like a lot, but in the context of Nvidia, it's kind of like a cute little pet project for them.
That's true. Although in the context of Intel, it's huge, right? I mean, Intel has a market cap, or had, of less than $100 billion before President Trump and his administration made this investment. Right now, Intel has a market cap of $144 billion. So I guess getting Jensen Huang on your side really does help. By the way, let's shift gears to weight loss drugs. Novo Nordisk's diabetes drug Ozempic, of course the weight loss version is Wegovy, beat Eli Lilly's Trulicity in a real-world survey of certain U.S. patients. Participants who took Ozempic were 23% less likely to have a heart attack, stroke, or die than people on Trulicity, according to Novo Nordisk. Now, Novo shares are up 5%. I feel like every day there's a new study like, you can lose more weight on our pill. Well, you die less often on our shot.
Right.
You
Your
have
blood
lower
sugar's
blood sugar on our pill. You know, and
just take them all.
Yeah.
Stabs of every single medicine, you're good to go. That is not medical advice. Don't do that.
No, please don't. If you take too much of these drugs, it can lead to disastrous consequences.
Okay, let's get back to markets and please away from that. Bloomberg macro strategist Michael Ball joins us a day after a Fed decision when stocks are at all-time highs. Yields are bouncing back up from 4%. Michael, Matt and I were talking about this strange dichotomy that you got in the SEP yesterday. Inflation or growth targets moved higher, unemployment lower, but more cuts. Anna Wong over at Bloomberg Economics makes this interesting argument that the net sum of that, of what you read, is a Fed whose reaction function is just more dovish now. Was that your read too?
Yeah, I think so. And it's funny that the initial reaction was that, and then we had this kind of turbulence as he spoke about kind of this safety risk management aspect that they were still thinking about, showing a reluctance to kind of really commit to a further rate cutting cycle that a lot think are warranted after what we've seen with the job revisions and the weaker job prints over the last 3 months. So overall, I think it is a very dovish signal for people, and I think finally equities kind of latched on. Obviously, there's been some other stories coming forth to help NASDAQ kind of outperform with this Nvidia you're just speaking to. But this is a positive thing. This is lower real rates on top of still positive growth. And overall, that's easier financial conditions, which should support risk and people moving out the curve into equities and credit.
You know, I grew up in the Reagan era, and he would say, you know, inflation is more dangerous than an armed robber. For savers, for retirees, inflation just sucks, right? But it seems like the U.S. government and the Fed have this shtick where they want to convince people they're really trying to get inflation down, and they're not. Do investors see through that ruse and realize that we're going to keep running it hot?
Yeah, I think market implied inflation measures are seeing it. I think what's interesting and what Powell took comfort in is that the consumer-based ones are still well anchored. I think honestly, nominal GDP growth is going to pick up because of this inflation and because of probably the fact that we will get this benefit from the One Big Beautiful Bill and all these other aspects from the easing cycle that they are now commencing upon. And when I say the cycle, I mean there is still going to be some further cuts coming, and people will latch onto that. Animal spirits will be unleashed, not only in the financial markets, but businesses themselves will probably commit more to CapEx. So we might get through this no hire, no fire period that was brought on by all the policy blitz uncertainty. And if we get into the beginning of next year and all of a sudden we have a better fiscal pulse, we have a better monetary pulse, and all of a sudden there's less uncertainty, boom, we're going to have somewhat of a nice catalyst for growth, and it's all going to be picked up by inflation. So the nominal prints of GDP will be much higher, and equities like that.
And by the way, I think, you know, it's almost a genius stroke. 1B3 is going to put off complaints by retirees and savers because it gives them no tax on Social Security. So they continue to see prices rise to levels that they never could have imagined they'd be at. But they have a little bit more money in their pockets.
But it's
because
a
of that
sugar rush,
legislation.
though, right? Because it's all concentrated in the first half of 2026.
Right.
To your point, Matt, people hate inflation. They still hate inflation. That hasn't gone away. So what does it say that this is?
But apparently not Fed governors.
Well, see, that's what I don't understand. If this is an environment where people still abhor inflation, they remember coming out of COVID and hating how much they have to spend, why isn't this a Fed that's biased towards bringing inflation down and is still biased towards the labor market?
Well, I think it is. I mean, you saw, like Michael McKee wisely pointed out, there's a big dispersion. So there is a debate. There are two camps still. Powell was successful in kind of wrangling everyone together, and I think there was this rally around him for Fed independence purposes.
But that in itself, should we even look to the Fed for a guide for the future? Should we even care about the SEP if there's such a wide range?
Yeah.
And all this is just Powell wrangling everyone together?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, wrangling everyone together, is that really a great thing for the Fed to do? Don't we want there to be two camps and real live debate?
We do, and this is the worry, right? And especially when policy and personnel are very well interlinked. And next year, we don't know what we're going to get. Obviously, there will be two changes for sure, possibly a third. We don't know what's going on with Lisa Cook. But all that said, yeah, you could discount 2026, and I think that's what caused the initial confusion. And now people are actually going to, again, go back to this concept where you have to make a call yourself as an investor on where you think growth is going, because that is all that matters now for the Fed. But we can look ahead only a month or two now as far as where we think things are. Our confidence interval is much weaker for further projections out, and the Fed's been saying that for a while, and nothing has changed there.
And all that matters for the market is that AI giants are still spending money.
Right, and then there's this, kind of K economy for the wealthy and the poor, and then this CapEx story where it's all AI. So yeah, there's a lot of these nuance which don't make for a great growth story, but we are seeing the prints at the hard data level still holding up, which gives earnings comfort.
Crazy move by Intel this morning, up just under 26%. Michael, thank you so much for joining. That's Bloomberg macro strategist Michael Ball. Speaking of which, let's get a check on the stock market right now. About 7 minutes into your trading day, we're higher by 0.5%. I think I can bet what the first company is going to be in terms of moving this market. It's going to be Nvidia. It's going to be Nvidia. It's going to be Intel. Those are your top two movers. Nvidia contributes more just because it is worth so many trillions of dollars. Again, this is a market. It is not trading on a Fed decision yesterday. It is trading on Nvidia investing $5 billion into their cute little pet project that is Intel and PC and data center developments. On the downside, you also have something similar moving on that. It's AMD, because they were snubbed in this deal. Caroline Hyde was telling us Nvidia could have gone for AMD. What's the difference between the two? It might have to do with that little 10% government stake being taken in Intel that made Nvidia go towards them. Let's look at the sectors. It's going to be an interesting one because you do have this push and pull from tech as to what's leading, what's not. But the fact that Nvidia's up means that the entirety of infotech is leading us on the way. You also have commodities, industrials, that follows. On the downside, consumer staples, you did have some pretty poor earnings from Darden. People aren't going out to Olive Garden and Longhorn Steakhouse. Cracker Barrel earnings were pretty bad, too. They're still feeling the backlash from the whole logo debacle. So hence why you see some of consumer discretionary and those more consumer names on the bottom of the stack, Matt.
Yeah, interesting. We'll continue to watch restaurant operator earnings. Coming up, we await President Trump's press conference with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. We will bring you that when it happens because we're expecting more tech deals to be announced. This is Bloomberg Open Interest.
Let's look at some of the top calls this morning, some of the analyst action that we're focusing up on. First up, Nike, that gets an upgrade At RBC Capital Markets, thanks to increasing revenue tied to the upcoming FIFA World Cup, those shares up just 0.5% as I pray and hope to the soccer gods I can also get a ticket. Next up, BTIG initiating coverage of Abercrombie and Fitch with a buy rating, saying the brand is returning to growth with multi-year tailwinds. At teen-focused Hollister unit, those shares up more than 2.5%. Finally, CSX, that gets upgraded to a buy at RBC Capital Markets. RBC says shares can benefit under virtually all consolidation scenarios on the back of the planned merger between Norfolk Southern and Union Pacific. Those shares up just under 1%, Matt.
All right, let's get to the big tech deal of the day that Dani and I have been talking about all morning. I assume Faro and Bramo were talking about it as well. Nvidia now owns a roughly 5% stake in Intel. The two companies are going to co-develop AI chips meant for personal computers and data centers. Let's get a read from Bloomberg Intelligence and Global Head of Tech Research, Mandeep Singh. And Mandeep, a lot of people are surprised by this news this morning. Obviously, the market was, considering the stock is up like 25% and change. But you could have, maybe should have forecast this, right?
Well, it was hard to anticipate who it will be. In this case, it turned out
somebody is going to throw them a paltry $5 billion.
Either I thought it would be one of the hyperscalers, because if you go back 1 year, Amazon had announced a partnership with Intel to use their foundry. Obviously, that didn't help turn around the foundry business in a big way. But clearly, you had some sort of a sentiment that, one of the hyperscalers would step in. And now with the government taking a stake in Intel, the catalyst was there that, for a turnaround in Intel, there has to be somebody who provided the funding in addition to, the government stake. And
there have been so many false dawns with Intel, though. It was SoftBank, a $2 billion investment from SoftBank. You've had Apollo do joint ventures with them. You've had Brookfield do joint ventures with them. The government money, now Nvidia. Is the time finally here? Is this finally enough for Intel to get their foundry business really up and running?
Well, this is not for the foundry.
Oh, sure,
so that's the surprise
That's actually
element.
An excellent point. It's for what, PCs?
It's for their chip design business. And look, x86 is still their dominant architecture in desktops and laptops. And we have all been waiting for a refresh cycle because of AI. So the hope is, with Nvidia providing the GPUs and Intel providing the CPUs, that chiplet architecture could help drive a PC refresh cycle. I mean, these roadmaps take a while to, execute. So it's not as if today there is an announcement and within 6 months everything will come together. So that's where I go back to that Amazon announcement. Like, within the last 1 year, we haven't seen a big change in Intel's fortune. So from that perspective, expectations should be tempered. But there was a catalyst when it comes to the stock after the government investment. And from a sum of the parts basis, Intel still has a dominant share in PCs, and you could see how a catalyst like this would change the sentiment.
Intel shares, by the way, year to date are up 54%. MP Materials, in which at President Trump's behest the U.S. bought a stake, year to date up 329%. I'm not looking at U.S. Steel or Nippon Steel, but what other investments should we get on board with? Like, if this administration makes a deal, and by the way, President Trump's, at the time, he tweeted, I paid $0 for Intel, which isn't exactly true. I mean, they paid $11 billion for it. It's worth approximately $11 billion. All goes to the USA. Why are stupid people unhappy with that? I will make deals like that for our country all day long. I will also help those companies that make such lucrative deals with the United States. He's going to help them out, right? He says the price is going to go up, and it is. What's the next deal we should watch out for?
Just now, an hour back in the press conference he had with the UK Prime Minister, he called out energy being a big bottleneck, and he called out, that permits are being granted for the build out of energy. So clearly, the signal is very clear that there will be a big build out of power to supply to these data centers, and it's being acknowledged by him. So that's where I would look at.
Yeah, it has a feeling of a little bit of a shotgun wedding, I have to say, Mandeep, between Intel and Nvidia. because it's a government-owned company, and it's Nvidia, and it's Jensen Huang trying to get in the president's favor?
I mean, it's a very, I think Nvidia is a politically sensitive company because of all the things that were going on with China. And, you know, they need access to the China market. So this is probably one way to please the administration that they care about, you know, the goals. And I don't think it's going to change anything in a big way in terms of the roadmap that Nvidia has, because they will still rely on TSMC for their manufacturing of data center chips. But clearly, this could be one way for Nvidia to kind of get to the PC ecosystem where Nvidia doesn't play. They are in the gaming market. That's high single-digit portion of their revenue, but they don't play in PCs. So if they're able to develop something, that's the market that they could cater to the x86 kind of ecosystem that Intel has.
PCs are the bane of my existence. So we really have to keep using them?
No, because we're just going to get sunglasses on our face that do the exact same thing.
Actually, it may create some pressure on Apple to do something. Now that Intel has done something about PCs, what does it mean for Apple? Because Apple is the only one that hasn't partnered with Nvidia in any way so far. So maybe, you know, we should watch out for that.
I love this. The winners are those that partner with Nvidia.
At least in this cycle.
Mandeep, thank you so much for joining. This has been great. That's Bloomberg Intelligence's Mandeep Singh. Coming up, we are awaiting President Trump's press conference with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. You're looking at live images of Buckinghamshire, where Chequers is, where we're awaiting that press conference. We will bring it to you when it begins. You're watching Bloomberg TV.
This is Open Interest. I'm Matt Miller. Quick check on stocks hitting all new highs today. We actually dropped a little bit, just about 0.1% yesterday after the Fed decision. But Romain Bostic of the close was on balance of power. I heard him illustrate an incredible event. So a year ago today was the Fed cut, the first Fed cut, and on the next trading session is when we got the rally. That's happening again now. S&P 500 up 0.5%. NASDAQ up 0.9%. Now, is it really driven by the Fed, or could it be the Nvidia Intel investment? I guess you can decide. Nvidia is up more than 2% right now. Obviously, that huge weight driving up every index on which it's listed. Intel gaining by 25%. It's not such a huge weight, but it still makes a little bit of a difference, gaining, what, like $40 billion in market cap. Novo Nordisk is up after saying that their shot is better at reducing the risk of heart attack than Eli Lilly's. Eli Lilly is up because yesterday they said their pill is better at reducing your blood sugar levels. And of course, they each go back and forth at who can make you lose more weight. Meta Platforms releasing a new kind of glasses. They're saying they're AI glasses because they have a screen on the inside. So this is, I think, 3.0 for those glasses. Mandeep Singh has a pair of the old ones. I should ask him if he's going to buy the new ones. They're like $800. And Tesla is rising about 0.4 or 0.5% really after I talked to the chief designer yesterday, Franz von Holzhausen. He says that they're going to make a new interior door mechanism that's easier to open, even if the battery's dead, Dani.
Such a great interview, and we're going to have more of that for you later.
And it's on my podcast.
And it's on the podcast.
Check out my podcast, Top Pursuit.
Do it all. Keep watching the show and listen to Matt's podcasts, hopefully not at the same time. Anyway, President Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer are set to hold a joint press conference at which some tech investments may be announced. Let's get the latest from Anne-Marie Hordern, Bloomberg's chief political correspondent and co-host of Bloomberg Surveillance. And Anne-Marie, we already had a big tech announcement just this morning.
Yeah, we had a massive tech announcement in terms of the culmination of all the deals that have been announced on the sidelines of this state visit, whether it's Microsoft, Google, Nvidia, Palantir. So you had the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, and President Donald Trump sitting side by side, signing this tech partnership. Jensen Huang was an individual that the president called out during this business reception. He was sitting in the front row, and the president said, "Oh, Jensen, you're here. We all hope you're right. What are you doing?" And this comes on the heels of what we learned this morning of Nvidia taking a stake in Intel. Just a month ago, almost to the day, you'll remember the U.S. government took a stake in Intel. And when you were watching the feeds, I caught a glimpse of Jensen Huang having a bit of a huddle with the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, and the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller. So we can connect the dots here. It does look like this administration, with a heavy hand, is potentially putting pressure on some companies to help build up national champions. I think some might call what the U.S. administration did state capitalism. Others might look at it, given national security concerns, calling it state warcraft. Today's announcement also comes on the day when you want to think of national security. News out of Beijing with Huawei basically mapping out a plan to compete with Nvidia and make sure they are not the dominant player in this market. So really some interesting news, and we are still waiting. We should note from the White House reaction to what Nvidia announced today, and maybe we're going to get that reaction when President Donald Trump holds this dual press conference with Keir Starmer.
Anne-Marie, I saw you also posted a photo of Larry Fink there. So it really is the good and great meeting at this event.
Yeah, absolutely. You have also financial chiefs that were at this business roundtable. Many of them were also at the banquet state dinner last night. Larry Fink, Steve Schwartzman, who also announced billions of dollars when it comes to investment in the United Kingdom, Citi's Jane Fraser, and Bank of America's Brian Moynihan. All of these individuals were at this event. It really goes to show that there are deep economic and business ties between these two countries, but that special relationship may get tense with some questions at this press conference.
Anne-Marie Horton covering all the president does for us. Thanks very much, our chief political correspondent and co-anchor of Bloomberg Surveillance. Coming up, we're going to show you President Trump's press conference with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer when it happens. And remember, we expect some deals. So this isn't just pomp and circumstance. This is Open Interest. We are 30 minutes into the trading day and looking at a new record on the S&P 500, 6628 here. And this is Open Interest.
This is, and you are Matt Miller. And I'm Dani Berger. It is the two forces of the first rate cut of 2025 and a sugar rush from the big deal this morning, Matt.
Yeah, I was just rethinking. Is it a new high? Would it be a new high? Because we closed at 66.15. Yeah. We were at 66.24 on the open on Tuesday. The highest we've been is 66.26. So yes, this would be a new high. Intraday high it is, and if we close here, a closing high as well. Coming up, a big chip deal. Nvidia makes a $5 billion bet on Intel, which is big for Intel, not so much for Nvidia, but it's big for you if you own Intel shares as well, up 25% in one day.
It's also big for you if you just own the equity index, so the S&P. That deal is helping to fuel a rally in stocks this morning, alongside a Fed delivering its first rate cut of the year and saying more is to come.
And this hour, President Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer are going to hold a joint press conference at which more tech investments are likely to be announced. By the way, we've also learned that tomorrow on Friday, President Trump and Xi are going to speak on the phone at 9 a.m. Eastern. Well, that's what they say. I'm guessing it'll be a video conference of some sort.
You think they Zoom?
I can't imagine, Trump just holding the phone and Xi too. Like, it's got to be a Zoom or a FaceTime.
I can absolutely imagine a phone. It's on speakerphone. He sat in the Oval Office with all of his aides around him. I can see that.
That's actually potential. I thought they were going to meet in person. When we got these headlines initially, Xi and Trump going to meet on Friday, I thought they would meet.
Well, he's meeting with Jensen Huang in the UK, who is the bridge between President Trump and Xi, so maybe he doesn't need a face-to-face meeting. And we're going to get more of that UK press conference when it begins between Keir Starmer and President Trump. But first, we begin with one of our other top stories, the Federal Reserve lowering its benchmark interest rate by a 0.25 percentage cut. It also penciled 2 more reductions this year. Fed Chair Powell explained why there was not a larger rate cut yesterday.
There wasn't widespread support at all for a 50 basis point cut today. I think we've done very large rate hikes and very large rate cuts in the last 5 years. And you tend to do those at a time when you feel that policy is out of place and needs to move quickly to a new place. That's not at all what I feel certainly now. I feel like our policy has been doing the right thing so far this year.
Joining us now is Michael McKee, Bloomberg's international economics and policy correspondent. And so the Fed cut, as we expected. Are they signaling as well that there are more cuts to come, even though financial conditions are pretty loose right now? We're at an all-time high on the stock market. They're expecting GDP to continue to grow, and unemployment expectations were moved lower.
You would have been great in the press conference yesterday. You could have just yelled that at Jay Powell. The Fed, with the statement and with the dot plot, was signaling there are more cuts to come. Jay Powell kind of trying to walk that back a little bit because it was really divided. There were 9 people who said that there should be no change in rates or only one cut this year. And there were 10 who said that there should be 2 cuts the rest of this year. And so it's only a 1-vote margin, and that 1 vote probably provided by Stephen Myron, who said there should be 6 cuts this year. So,
wow,
at this point,
6 cuts.
At this point, the Fed is looking to see what happens. We're back to data dependency, basically, looking to see what happens going forward. Each meeting is going to be live. Each meeting is going to be influenced by the data they get ahead of that meeting on not only inflation, but on the unemployment rate.
This is the thing. Okay, you look at the dots, for example, 2027, that very low one below 2.5%. Everyone looked at that and said, Stephen Myron, toss it out. Who cares? He's an outlier. Should we really just toss this out? Is this not a lens into what the Fed will look like in the makeup in 2026 when Trump gets his pick for a Fed chair and potentially someone else, depending on what happens with Powell? Is this not more instructive for where the Fed goes from here?
Not necessarily, and the reason being is the answer that Jay Powell gave to the question put to him about how influential was Stephen Myron. So there's 19 people on the committee, 12 of them vote at any one time. So you have to have a lot of influence in order to make people change their votes. And in this case, without saying it, Jay Powell was saying Stephen Myron had no influence. And if you put somebody on as chairman who doesn't get the respect of the rest of the committee, he's not going to have a lot of, or she's not going to have a lot of interest either, or influence either. So we have to wait and see who gets appointed to these roles. We have to wait and see whether Jay Powell leaves the Fed, which he sort of pointedly refused to answer yesterday, to see if Trump gets another seat on the Fed. And of course, we're waiting for the resolution of the Lisa Cook case.
Is there a real concern that if Trump gets another seat on the Fed and he has Stephen Myron there, that Waller or anyone else that he has on the board is going to cancel out the slate of new regional presidents next year when they have that chance?
That's what I've been calling the tinfoil hat theory.
Nikki Bowman's the other one.
Because it seemed to be a joke when I first raised this about 6-8 months ago, and now people are taking it seriously as a possibility. The only way that would work is if Chris Waller and maybe even Mickey Bowman went along.
But they didn't even vote for a 50 basis point cut. They didn't even vote yesterday for 50, even though they could have, and they probably took themselves out of the running for Fed chair. So you get a feeling that the institutional aspect of the Fed is more important to them than bowing to Donald Trump's wishes. And of course, Donald Trump will be gone in 2 years after the decision is made next year.
You say that, Mike. Are you sure about that?
All right, let's
put
not,
away the tin hats.
We won't go there right now. But do they want to be known as the people who destroyed the Fed going forward when Trump is gone? So I think it's going to be hard to see them actually doing it. It's more a case of just over time, and this would presume that Trump either stays on as president somehow or one of his supporters is elected. But as you slowly add more people to the Fed, then you could see a change in how they look at the economy.
You're full-on conspiracy theorist today.
I'm not. I'm just, look, Donald Trump said that we would never have to vote in an election again. And more people are saying maybe that's a possibility.
Let's let Mike go so he doesn't have to get into that. Mike,
I did think it was odd that Trump has not commented on the Fed yet. So
True.
maybe he'll do that today.
Well, he is busy in the UK, and we're about to get to that now. Michael McKee, thank you so much for joining. And as promised, President Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer are set to hold a joint press conference at which some tech investments may be announced. Standing by is Anne-Marie Hordern, Bloomberg's chief political correspondent and co-host of Surveillance. Anne-Marie, what are we expecting from this presser in just a few moments' time?
Yeah, this press conference will take place imminently between Donald Trump, President of the United States, and the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. We should note, up until this point, it's been very welcoming and warm ties between these two countries. The president last night at this state banquet was really waxing on about the special relationship, how these two countries are two notes, part of the same chord, beautiful, separate, but meant to be played together. And then this morning, they lamented about the excitement of the AI infrastructure build out in the United Kingdom and the big, giant U.S. tech companies pouring billions, tens of billions of dollars into this country. But that special relationship may get a little bit icy or a little bit more tense during this press conference because there's a number of hurdles that these two individuals are going to have to get over. One, they're probably going to be asked about the trade deal. The UK was set to ask the United States about the steel tariff at 25%, if that could be brought down to zero, as well as exemptions from some products like Scottish whiskey. Second, the Times is reporting, the Times in London, that this weekend, after the departure of the U.S. administration and President Donald Trump, Keir Starmer is set to formally recognize the state of Palestine. Now, of course, the United States has said that by doing that can actually impact and hurt negotiations between Hamas and Israel, because they say that the United States says that this is just going to embolden Hamas. So that might be something that these two individuals are going to disagree on in public. And then finally, we should note that Jeffrey Epstein might come up in this press conference. There has been 3 forced departures from the Keir Starmer government in under 2 weeks. And the last one was the British ambassador to the United States after revelations in a Bloomberg News story about his close ties with Jeffrey Epstein, of course, the sex offender, the late financier. His emails with him, these were revealed. He was ousted from that job. And of course, this is someone that the president himself knew for years. And before the president walked into Windsor the evening before, projected on the walls behind me was a photo of Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump. So whether it's trade, domestic headlines of politics, or geopolitics and what's going on in the Middle East, that is going to happen there. I believe they're there, so we should take a listen to the leaders.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's listen in Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, standing with President Donald Trump. Let's listen to their remarks.
It's a moment to celebrate the unique bond between our two countries. But today we've gone far beyond that. We've renewed the special relationship for a new era. The United Kingdom and the United States stand together today as first partners on defence, first partners in trade with the groundbreaking deal we struck in May, and now with the new agreement that we've just signed this afternoon. We're confirming our status as the first partners in science and technology, ready to define this century together, just as we did the last. This tech partnership has the power to change lives. It's our chance to ensure that technologies like AI, quantum, and others amplify human potential, solve problems, cure diseases, make us richer and freer, strengthen the cause of democracy, not tyranny. This is the territory on which the future will be won. So this partnership today is a signal of our determination to win this race together and to ensure it brings real benefits in jobs, in growth, in lower bills, to put more hard-earned cash in people's pockets at the end of each month. That's what we're determined to deliver. And we're bringing businesses with us. We've just come from a fantastic meeting with business leaders where we set out this vision. They have responded with new deals and investment, breaking every record that we have. £250 billion flowing both ways across the Atlantic. That is a record. Expected to create 15,000 jobs here in the United Kingdom. High-skilled jobs in cutting-edge sectors where people can build careers for the long term, changing lives in communities up and down our country. And look, while we shape this bond for a new era, the fundamentals have not changed. Security remains the cornerstone of this special relationship. We have the deepest, most advanced defence relationship in the world. Our warriors train together and they fight together. Our industries build together, everything from fast jets to the new AUKUS-class submarines. So now, as we drive up defence spending, we're going to sweep away the barriers to working together on new defence technologies so we can stay ahead of our adversaries. We're united in defence and security, yes, absolutely. But we're also united in the pursuit of peace. We are working together to end the humanitarian catastrophe in the Middle East, get the aid in, free the hostages, and ultimately bring Israel and the region back towards a comprehensive plan which can deliver peace and security for Israelis and Palestinians alike. We're also working together to end the killing in Ukraine. In recent days, Putin has shown his true face, mounting the biggest attacks since the invasion began, with yet more bloodshed, yet more innocents killed, and unprecedented violations of NATO airspace. These are not the actions of someone who wants peace. So we've discussed today how we can build our defences further, support Ukraine, and decisively increase the pressure on Putin to get him to agree a peace deal that will last. And President Trump, you have led the way here, and we will continue to stand and work together for security and for peace. Mr. President, next year we'll celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States. We've come on a long journey together since 1776. But it's no exaggeration to say that the partnership our two nations have built has shaped the world from the beaches of Normandy to the founding of NATO, to the creation of technologies that have revolutionized our lives. Time and time again, it is British and American men and women side by side, changing the path of history and turning it towards our values, towards freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. In Britain, we take huge pride in that. And let's be clear, this relationship is not just about history, it's about the future. It's about the benefits it delivers now and for decades to come, to make our people safer and better off. We've shown today that we're delivering those benefits, improving people's lives. So we will go into that anniversary year more optimistic than ever and more confident than ever about our two great nations and what they can achieve side by side. Thank you. And it is now my pleasure to give the floor to Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you very much, very much. Prime Minister Starmer, Melania and I are tremendously thankful for the wonderful hospitality that you and Lady Starmer have extended today at Chequers. Quite the place, I must say, quite the place. And we're grateful beyond words for the spectacular honor of the state visit yesterday at Windsor Castle, hosted by His Majesty King Charles III and Her Majesty Queen Camilla. These are two fantastic people. We will never forget it. As I said last night, the bond between our countries is like no other anywhere in the world. The United States and the United Kingdom have done more good on this planet than any two nations in human history. That is thanks in large part to the traditions of British liberty, which grew up on these isles, these beautiful, magnificent isles, and were carried by our ancestors to the New World. We're forever joined, and we are forever friends, and we will always be friends. This enduring connection is why I was thrilled that the United Kingdom was the very first country with which we made a historic trade deal, and a very good trade deal. He's a tough negotiator. I think it was a better deal for you than us, but these are minor details.
It's a very good deal for both of us.
He's a great negotiator who will extend our unparalleled security alliance into the realm of economic security for the first time, and I look forward to finalizing it very soon. We'll have it done very quickly. We have also just signed a historic technology prosperity deal, one of a kind, to ensure our countries lead the next great technological revolution side by side. In fact, we just left the business leaders, the biggest in the world. Some are in this room right now. And that was quite a meeting we had on business and trade and technology. This trip has galvanized $350 billion in deals across many sectors, and we're committed to ensuring that the UK has a secure and reliable supply of the best AI hardware and software on Earth. And we supply that, and we'll make sure we supply it in quantity to the UK. And we also are joining forces on quantum computing and nuclear power, a natural partnership for close allies. The United States, as you probably have heard, is doing better than it has ever done in terms of business and investment. The stock market has hit a new high, as you know, and that's for many, many days out of our fairly short 8 months. And we seem to be hitting new highs, and I think we're going to do much better even as time goes by. Jobs are at a record, and most importantly, we have more than $17 trillion, $17 trillion, and this is during an 8-month period being invested in the country, which is not only a record, but if you compare $17 trillion to the last year of the Biden administration, they did $250 billion. They didn't do $1 trillion for the 4-year period. We did $17 trillion of investment coming in. A lot of it's because of tariffs, and a lot of it's for a lot of other reasons, but there's never been anything like it. It's an economic superstar. That's what's become. It was mismanaged and badly handled for a long period of time, but it's not badly handled anymore. So that's a record. And remember, that's up until 8 months. We have another few months to go, and that number is going to get significantly higher, especially if we win a certain case that we're waiting to hear. That will be something like the world has never seen. I want to congratulate the United Kingdom on making the vital commitment to spend 5% of GDP on defense at the NATO summit this year. We've worked together very closely in so many ways. I'm very honored to tell you that we've solved 7 wars, wars that were unsolvable, wars that couldn't be negotiated or done. The U.S. has done 7 of them. The one that I thought would be easiest would be because of my relationship with President Putin, but he's let me down. He's really let me down. It was going to be Russia and Ukraine, but we'll see how that turns out. But that turned out to be, I thought it might be among the easiest of the group, but we had settled just about every conflict. And as you know, we're working very hard on Israel and Gaza. All that's happening over there. Complex, but it's going to get done. It'll all get done right. And likewise, Russia and Ukraine will get done. But you never know in war. You know, war is a different thing. Things happen that are very opposite of what you thought. You thought you were going to have an easy time or a hard time, and it turns out to be the reverse. As we saw in the unforgettable parade yesterday at Windsor Castle, what a place it is. The British Armed Forces carry on one of the finest military traditions in the world, one of the greatest marching bands, one of the most magnificent sights I've seen. I know that our service members look forward, and we do look so forward to working even more closely with yours as you push toward that 5% goal. And I think, Mr. Prime Minister, you're just about there. You're going to be there very quickly, along with a lot of other great countries. I want to thank NATO and our wonderful head of NATO, who's really worked very hard, Mark, for the job they've done. As you know, they NATO was at 2% GDP, and they didn't pay it. Now they're at 5%, then they pay it. And we appreciate that. And we're sending a lot of weapons to NATO. NATO is paying for those weapons in full. But we're sending them, and we're doing a great job at getting them what they need. And we appreciate the fact that they're taking care of it, because the United States is into that war for $350 billion. And just really very sad. Just got out of control. They didn't know what they were doing. But over the generations, British and American warriors have shed their blood side by side in defense of liberty and freedom. And that's why it's so imperative that the United States and the United Kingdom stand together for these fundamental rights and values of the English-speaking world. And we've always stood together, and we will continue to. Just last week, a great American, Charlie Kirk, was heinously assassinated for speaking his mind. He was a great young man. Incredible future. Some people said he might be president someday. I told him, I said, Charlie, I think you have a good shot someday at being president. And he just wanted to take care of youth. He loved youth. I've never seen anybody relate to youth like Charlie, and they related to him, and they're devastated. But I appreciate the many British citizens who have offered their condolences. And again, Charlie was a great person. We'll be going out to a service on Sunday. I'll be leaving with some of the people in this room just to celebrate Charlie and all that he's done. So incredible. Never seen anything like it. But I hope that together our nations can lead a movement to defend the glorious traditions of freedom on both sides of the Atlantic. There could be no greater tribute to the immortal bonds of affection and loyalty that unite the British and the American people for all of time. We have a relationship like no other. It will always be that way. We will always be united. We'll always be together. And I just want to thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for the great job I think you're doing. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We're going to take some questions. I'll call 2 or 3 to start with, and then I'll pass over to the President. I've got Chris Mason from the BBC first. Chris.
Thank you both. Chris Mason, BBC News. Mr. President, the UK is expected to recognise a Palestinian state in the coming days as the killing in Gaza continues. It often seems that you're the only person that Israel will listen to. What more can you say to them to tell them to stop? And why is the UK's position on a Palestinian state, in your view, wrong? And Prime Minister, what will the recognition of a Palestinian state actually achieve? Is it not just gesture politics to appease people in your own party? Thank you both.
Well, Chris, let me just start with that, because we discussed this amongst other things. We had the best part of an hour, I think, upstairs earlier today, just one-to-one, going through a number of affairs, world affairs, in private. And we absolutely agree on the need for peace and a roadmap, because the situation in Gaza is intolerable. The hostages have been held for a very, very long time, and they must be freed. And we need aid to get into Gaza at speed. And so it's within that context of a plan for peace, which we're working hard on, which not only did we discuss this morning, but our 2 teams have been working together on, that the question of recognition needs to be seen. And so it's part of that overall package which hopefully takes us from the appalling situation we're in now to the outcome of a safe and secure Israel, which we do not have, and a viable Palestinian state. Thank you.
Well, simply, I want the hostages released now, right now, not 1, 2, we'll give you 3 more tomorrow, and, you know, like it's been, but we're the ones that got all the hostages released. We got many, many came to the Oval Office, and I've heard stories like I've never thought even possible. There was no humanity, no anything. I said to them, I said, was there any warmth shown during this stay? Like they offered you a little extra meal, they gave you a little smile, and they said, don't worry, you'll be okay. And every one of them said, not even a little bit. Amazing, you know, to think that during this stay, long stay in some cases. We had a man the other day, 451 days he was there. I always ask that question. And was there any warmth shown? Just a little word of, encouragement. And the answer is every time, absolutely not. I'm shocked to hear it, because in the worst cases, there's always somebody that comes through. We have to remember October 7th, one of the worst, most violent days in the history of the world, not just there, the history of the world. And I got to see the tapes, and I wish I didn't see them, actually, but I got to see them. And I want an end. I want the hostages released, and I think it's going to be okay. But it has been a brutal period of time. But this has been going on for a long time. This is not something that's over the last year, 2 years. But this has been for decades and decades. But we want it to end. We have to have the hostages back immediately. That's what the people of Israel want. They want them back. And we want the fighting to stop. And it's going to stop. But a lot of bad things. Hamas said that they're going to put the hostages up as bait. They're going to put the hostages in front of any attack. And that's pretty brutal. We haven't heard that one in a long time. So we have to remember that. So I have a disagreement with the Prime Minister on that score. Okay? One of our few disagreements, actually.
Great. Can I take Jack from The Sun? Jack.
Thank you both. Jack Elson from The Sun. Mr. President, in the 9 months you've been in office, you've been incredibly successful in all but eliminating crossings on your southern border.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, illegal migration is at record levels in Britain. The Prime Minister is trying to tackle that. What advice would you give to the man standing next to you on trying to stop illegal migration in Britain? And Prime Minister, if I can just ask, the President is all about drill, baby, drill in terms of trying to secure American energy and cut bills for Americans. Meanwhile, you are turning Britain's back on oil and gas in favour of renewable energies, such as wind turbines. Why do you think that you are right and he is wrong?
So we had millions of people flowing in, totally unchecked, totally unvetted from the Biden administration. 25 million, in my opinion, that would be about 25 million. They came from prisons. They came from mental institutions. They were gang members. They were drug dealers. They came from the Congo. They came from all parts of South America. They came from everywhere. Think of it, prisons from the Congo being released into the United States, prisons opened up in Venezuela and many other countries pouring into the United States. And I couldn't believe it. One of the reasons I decided to run. I decided to run because I don't want to be controversial. But you see what's happened, and you see all the information that's come out. We won in 2020 big. And I said, let's run. We got to run, because I saw what was happening. And the worst thing that I saw was all of these people. We've already solved inflation. We've solved prices. Oil is way down. Energy is way down in the United States. But what I saw happening with millions of people pouring into our country, I couldn't stand to watch it. And we've done a great job. Nobody, if you've seen the last, I appreciate your question, by the way, nobody, absolutely zero, and I'm not even sure that's possible, but it's a very liberal group that come out with those statistics. The last 3 months, we had zero. From millions of people a year ago, we had zero people enter our country illegally. And we do have people coming in legally through a legal process and testing and lots of other things. I think it's very important, and we speak about it. And I think your situation is very similar. You have people coming in, and I told the Prime Minister I would stop it. And it doesn't matter if you call out the military, it doesn't matter what means you use, but it's going to destroys countries from within. And we're actually now removing a lot of the people that came into our country. It's a very hard chore. We were given a very, very bad hand. Millions of people came in from prisons and mental institutions. We have to remove them. And we are removing them. We have no choice. And I feel very strongly about it. Thank you very much.
Jack, let me just deal with the question of returns, because this is obviously an issue we're taking incredibly seriously. We've struck a number of deals, both on cooperation with other countries, because this is a problem right across Europe, to tackle the problem of actually breaking up the gangs that are running this trade. We have had a record number of returns, over 35,000 now since we came into office. That's the highest number for the best part of 10 years. We struck the returns arrangement with France, and notwithstanding the challenges to that scheme, which you've seen in the last few days, a flight went off at 6:15 this morning, successfully returning someone under that scheme. So that is an important step forward. Obviously, there's no silver bullet here. There's a range of things that need to be done. But given the challenges of returning people, it is important that we're able to prove it can be done. It was done. It was done early this morning. So I can confirm that that flight went. It went successfully. And I'm pleased about that. Now we need to ramp that up at scale, which was always envisaged under the scheme. But it's very important that we have been able to prove that the proof of concept, if you like, that this can be done and will continue in that way. On the question of energy, firstly, let me be really clear that I am absolutely determined to ensure that the price and cost of energy comes down so that bills come down both for individuals, for families with their household bills, but also for business, because this is so important. The mix will include oil and gas for many years to come from the North Sea. We've been clear about that for some time, but we also need to mix that with renewables, and it's the mix that's really important. And the approach I've taken on this is the same approach that I take to many other things, a pragmatic approach. Thank you, Jack.
I would like to say that we inherited the worst inflation in the history of our country. We had inflation, the likes of which we've really never seen. They say 48 years, and I'll accept that, but I really don't. We had the worst inflation in the history of our country. And we had a expression that I used a lot, drill, baby, drill. And as you know, we brought fuel way down, the prices way down. And we don't do wind because wind is a disaster. It's a very expensive joke, frankly. And we got our energy prices way down. That brought the inflation way down. And now we have very little inflation. And we have a very, very strong economy. So that was very important. Drill, baby, drill. And you have a great asset here. And we spoke about it. It's called the North Sea. The North Sea oil is phenomenal. And I hope, because I love this country, you know, my mother was born in Scotland. And the Hebrides, Stornoway, that's serious Scotland. We were talking about it. And I want this country to do well. And you have great assets that you're going to start using, I believe, under this Prime Minister.
Thank you. And I've got Matthew from The Economist. Matthew.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Mr. President, you say that President Putin has let you down. Have negotiations run out of road, and what are your next steps to compel an end to this war?
Well, he has let me down. I mean, he's killing many people, and he's losing more people than he's killing. Yeah. I mean, frankly, the Russian soldiers are being killed at a higher rate than the Ukrainian soldiers. But, yeah, he said, let me down. I don't like to see. It's death. You know, it doesn't affect the United States. We have, other than unless you end up in a world war over this thing, you could. This was a thing that would have never happened had I been president. If I were president, it would have never happened. And it didn't happen for 4 years. Most people agree it didn't happen, nor was it close to happening. And I spoke to President Putin about Ukraine. It was the apple of his eye. I've said that many times. It was. But he would have never done what he did, except that he didn't respect the leadership of the United States. They just went through the Afghanistan total disaster for no reason whatsoever. We're going to leave Afghanistan, but we're going to leave it with strength and dignity. And we're going to keep Bagram, the big air base, one of the biggest air bases in the world. We gave it to them for nothing. We're trying to get it back, by the way. Okay, that could be a little breaking news. We're trying to get it back because they need things from us. We want that base back. But one of the reasons we want the base is, as you know, it's an hour away from where China makes its nuclear weapons. So a lot of things are happening, but I am very disappointed in the fact that that one's not settled. To think that we settled Abercrombie and Albania as an example, it was going on for years. It was never going to be settled. If you remember, the Prime Minister and the presidents, they were there for many years. They said, when they were in my office, we settled. And they started off at both sides of the Oval Office, so far away. I didn't know you could be so far away. And as we were together for an hour, they kept getting closer, closer. And by the time we finished, we all hugged each other. And one said, I've been in this position for 22 years, and all I've done is kill their people. The other was there for 7 years, and all he did was kill their people. And we got it settled. And we did others, as you know. The Congo, we settled the Congo with Rwanda. That was going on, and that was a machete war. That was a gruesome war. Many people, close to 10 million people killed. We got that settled. My biggest disappointment, but it's, you know, look, we did 7, and most of them were not thought to be settleable. We did India and we did Pakistan. That's 2 nuclear. That was purely for trade. You want to trade with us, you're going to have to get along. And they were going at it hot and heavy. But the Russia situation, I hope we're going to have some good news for you coming up. But again, it doesn't affect the United States. And look, it doesn't so much affect you. Of course, you are a lot closer to the scene than we are. We have a whole ocean separating us. But I will say this, it's millions of people have died in that war, millions of souls. And they're not American. The soldiers, mostly soldiers, as you know. The soldiers are being killed at levels nobody's seen since the Second World War. But they're being killed, and I feel I have an obligation to get it settled for that reason. Thank you.
And just to add on that question, because we have to put extra pressure on Putin. And it's only when the president has put pressure on Putin that he's actually shown any inclination to move. So we have to ramp that pressure up. I think it's important to have this conversation in the context of what's happened in recent weeks. We saw damage and bombing to the British Council in Kyiv. These are targets that it was thought until recently were not targets that would be hit. The British Council, the European Union Embassy, the Council of Ministers, where President Zelensky's ministers work was hit. Again, these were thought to be places that wouldn't be hit. And then the incursion into Poland last week. And if you put that together, what you can see is either an emboldenment or at least an increased recklessness on Putin's part. And that's why I said earlier that they're not the actions of someone who wants peace. So we have to ramp up. And we discussed earlier today, we have built the coalition of the willing with British leadership and French leadership, stepping up with military planning in the seas, in the sky, on the ground, and ramping up what we do with the Ukrainians themselves. And of course, that taken with an American guarantee is now an example, I think, of the challenge of Europe stepping up to the plate, which it has done in the last few months, to show through what we and the French have done that we're prepared to take the lead in this and take the necessary measures.
But that's a war that could have been a third world war, and I don't think we're going to be there now. But that was heading to a third world war, and what a shame it is. What a shame it is.
Mr. President, do you want to call some of the...
I would love to call a few of them. Bev, do you want to have a question?
I've got to come back to you.
Bev Turner, GB News. Thank you. Having been in DC for a few weeks, it's really interesting to see how you run the country as a proud Christian leader. And it really begs the question to the Prime Minister, if you don't mind, are we still a Christian country? But also...
when you say we, are you talking here or...?
Here. The UK. I'm still British. I might live in America. I'm still British. But also,
I can't give you that answer.
That's for the Prime Minister. But also, despite what we talked about in Scotland a few weeks ago, we still have 12,000 people a year here being arrested for social media posts, for free speech violations. Does that not remain an important area that there is still a lot of disagreement on?
I'd like to have you answer that.
Yeah, look, I mean, in terms of a Christian country, I was christened, so that is, my church has been all my life, and we are, that is wired into our informal constitution. Of course, we celebrate many other faiths as well, and I'm really proud that we're able to do so as a country. And on free speech, that has long lived in this country, free speech. It's one of the founding values of the United Kingdom, and we protect it jealously and fiercely, and always will, and we will bear down on any limits on free speech. I draw a limit between free speech and the speech of those that want to peddle paedophilia and suicide social media to children, and therefore I'm all for free speech. I'm also for protecting children from things that will harm them, paedophiles, those that peddle suicide, which has had a terrible consequence for individual, particularly teenagers. And so that's the balance we strike. But we have had freedom of speech in this country for a very long time, and we will always protect it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Brian, please.
Thank you. Prime Minister, it's good to see you again. You have a beautiful country. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for being
Two
here.
questions. One, just recently, President Trump labeled Antifa domestic terrorists. Would you consider doing something like that in your country?
Well, we obviously will take decisions for ourselves. I don't want to comment on the decisions of the president, but we take our decisions ourselves.
And my question to you, President Trump, is there any update on the auto pen?
Yeah, it's just gotten worse from their standpoint. The people that used it, and one in particular, one person, was never told by Biden to do it. Only spoke to Biden twice, and that was just talking about the weather, not talking about any order. And he was taking orders from people other than Joe Biden. Joe Biden wasn't giving those orders. You know, Joe Biden didn't believe in open borders. He didn't. I've known him for a long time. He was never the brightest bulb in the ceiling, as we know. You can go back 40 years ago and you'll see that. Go back and take a look at the hearings on Justice Thomas, and you'll see that very much. But he didn't believe in open borders and all of this nonsense that they're peddling now, which is why they're not in office any longer. It's a shame. The auto pen was illegal. It was illegally used. He never gave the orders. He never told them what to do. And I guess the only one he signed, or one of the few he signed, was the pardon for his son. But you had the congressman who, when they got the information, they found out they were guilty, and they deleted and destroyed all information, everything. You couldn't get any of it. They found out that Nancy Pelosi actually was offered the 10,000 soldiers, and she turned them down. They found out many things that were very bad. So they deleted and destroyed all information. You talk about freedom of the press and freedom of speech. How about that one? And there's not a thing. This is after a year and a half of hearings. They destroyed everything. And somebody's got to be held responsible. So Biden, what he did is they knew, I don't think he knew, but somebody knew. I don't think Biden had a clue about anything, if you want to know the truth. But they gave a pardon to those congresspeople. They gave a pardon. Those people are so guilty. They gave a pardon, but Biden didn't know about it. The people, whether it's Lisa or any of those people in there that really ran it, I know them all. And they're sick people. They're smart people. They're very smart. They're probably brilliant, but they're sick in ideology. And they were running the auto pen, and it was totally illegal what he did. And I hope it's going to be so adjudged.
Do you want to take one more, and then I'll
Okay.
go back to British?
Let's see. Peter, go ahead.
Thank you, President Trump. In the deal that you're working on for the Chinese to sell TikTok to an American buyer, are the Americans going to have to come up with their own algorithm, or are they going to continue to use the successful but addictive Chinese algorithm?
So what we're doing, and we're speaking to President Xi on Friday to see if we can finalize something on TikTok, because there is tremendous value, and I hate to give away value, but I like TikTok. It helped get me elected. In fact, Charlie said, "Sir, you ought to get on TikTok. You'd be great." I said, "Really? Tell me about TikTok." And we, as you know, we did unbelievably well with youth, like at a level that no Republican has ever even dreamt of. And in what, you know, look, I think we won it for a lot of reasons, but that was a reason we won the election by such a big number. TikTok has tremendous value. The United States has that value in its hand because we're the ones that have to approve it. I specifically get the right to approve it. The people that are investing it are among the greatest investors in the world, the biggest, the richest, and they'll do a great job. And we're doing it in conjunction with China. But we are getting, the United States is getting a tremendous fee plus, I call it a fee plus, for just making the deal. And I don't want to throw that out the window. I can say this, that you'll have a lot of very unhappy youth. And I use TikTok very legitimately, very straight, just statements every day, little statements, short statements. "Sir, make it short, please." And TikTok Jack, we call him. It was pretty good. Did a good job for me, I guess. But no, I'd rather reap the benefits. I mean, the kind of money we're talking about is very substantial, and it'll be owned by all American investors and, you know, the best investors and the very rich people and companies are going to be owning it. Very, very straight, very legitimate companies, and really companies that love America. So they're going to be owning it. It's a big thing. And on a much bigger scale, and probably that's why we were able to get that, but on a much bigger scale, we're pretty close to a deal. We may do an extension with China, but it's an extension based on the same terms that we have right now, which are pretty good terms.
And my question for Prime Minister Starmer, if you feel so strongly about officially recognizing Palestine for statehood, why are you waiting for President Trump to leave the country? Why can't you just do it right now? And isn't there a risk in rewarding Hamas with that?
Well, let me be really clear about Hamas. They're a terrorist organization who can have no part in any future governance in Palestine. And what happened on October the 7th was the worst attack since the Holocaust. We have extended family in Israel. I understand firsthand the psychological impact that had across Israel. So I know exactly where I stand in relation to Hamas. Hamas, of course, don't want a two-state solution. They don't want peace. They don't want a ceasefire. So I'm very clear where I stand on Hamas. Okay. On the question of recognition, I made my position clear at the end of July as to the timing, which has got nothing to do with this state visit, and I've discussed it with the President, as you would expect amongst two leaders who respect each other and like each other and want to bring about a better solution in the best way that we can. Thank you so much. Can I go back then to Robert at ITV?
Robert Person, ITV. Mr. President, you uniquely, you alone in the whole world, have the power to persuade Prime Minister Netanyahu to stop the demolition of Gaza City, to stop the starvation of Palestine, and to stop the killing of civilians. If not now, when will you exercise that power to tell him to stop?
Sure.
And then for both of you on...
But you do understand about October 7th.
Of course,
you do understand.
So believe me, I understand.
One of the
about
worst days in the history of humanity. What happened, I have seen the tapes. Babies that are 4 months old and just chopped up to pieces. And you've seen the tapes and I've seen the tapes. You're a professional and so am I. And people forget about October 7th. I can't forget about it. So I want it to end, but I want the hostages back. I don't want the hostages used as human shields, which is what Hamas is threatening to do.
But as soon as they're back, that's the moment you will tell Netanyahu
well,
to stop.
it would certainly help, but I have to have the hostages back. And I don't want them back piecemeal, as I said before. I want them back.
And on a separate issue, free speech, your Vice President Vance said that free speech is under attack in the UK. Do you agree with him? And Prime Minister, we saw the dismissal of a very well-known chat show host in America last night, Mr. Kimmel. Is free speech more under attack in Britain or America?
Well, Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else, and he said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk. And Jimmy Kimmel is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago. So, you can call that free speech or not. He was fired for lack of talent. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, on the question of Charlie Kirk, can I just express how shocking that is, I think, to everybody who believes in free speech and in democracy. It sent shockwaves through the world. And I know that he was a friend of the president, and I reached out straight away to the president because I understood how impactful it would be on him and his family. And we all need to be absolutely clear about that. Whatever our political views, it is shocking and is to be condemned. On free speech, not much to add to the answer I gave earlier. This country's had free speech for a very, very long time. It is part of who we are as a country, and it is the values that we fought for. We fought for it during the Second World War alongside each other. So we need no reminding of the importance of free speech in this country. Thank you, Robert. And I go to Beth for the final question, please. Beth.
Thank you so much.
Sky.
Thank you, Beth Rigby, Sky News. Thank you, Prime Minister. If I could start with you. Prime Minister, President Trump has said he's ready to impose major sanctions on Russia if NATO countries stop purchasing Russian oil. He's got a point, hasn't he? Is that what you now believe is needed to bring Putin properly to the table? And what's your message to the President on US sanctions? And Mr. President, if I may, the King praised your personal commitment last night to finding solutions to the world's most intractable conflicts. You have invested much of your time and effort in Ukraine, but even as you seek to broker a deal, President Putin is escalating the war. He's firing drones into NATO airspace. You say he has let you down. Was it a mistake to invite him to Alaska? Do you regret it?
No.
And is it time to squeeze him, sir, and scare him and impose sanctions? And finally, if I may, the elephant in the room, Lord Mandelson, he is no longer the ambassador. Do you have some sympathy with him that he lost his job over historic links to Jeffrey Epstein? Thank you very much, sir.
I don't know him, actually. I had heard that, and I think maybe the Prime Minister would be better speaking of that. That was a choice that he made, and I don't know. What is your answer to that?
Well, I mean, it's very straightforward. Some information came to light last week which wasn't available when he was appointed, and I made a decision about it, and that's very clear. On the question of the pressure on Putin and on Russia, which is obviously really important. Look, I think it is a challenge to Europe. There are a number of European countries which are too reliant on energy from Russia. The UK actually obviously has almost got nothing at all, but we do need to bear down and work with our European counterparts here. There are one or two countries, I think, that do need to look again at the question of energy. There's no one silver bullet here. We do have to have a wider suite of sanctions, which we've put in place a number of times, working across Europe and with the United States. And of course, we must, and we are, making sure that Ukraine is in the strongest position now, because one of my long concerns here has been that whilst we talk about a ceasefire, and we all want a ceasefire, and we talk about what might happen after a ceasefire, we mustn't forget that Ukraine needs our support now. And we've said we stand with Ukraine from the start to the finish, and that means we must continue to supply them with what they need in order to fight this war, which of course resulted from and is a result of Russian aggression. We have particularly done the sort of leadership role in the coalition of the willing, so that if there is a ceasefire and if there is a deal, and I do hope there is, that is then lasting and not then broken, because given previous history, I don't trust Putin. Thank you.
Very simply, if the price of oil comes down, Putin's going to drop out. He's going to have no choice. He's going to drop out of that war. And when I found out that the European nations were buying oil from Russia, and as you know, I'm very close to India. I'm very close to the Prime Minister of India. I spoke to him the other day, wished him a happy birthday. We have a very good relationship. He put out a beautiful statement, too. We have, but I said, you know, I sanctioned them. China is paying a very large tariff right now to the United States. But I'm willing to do other things, but not when the people that I'm fighting for are buying oil from Russia. If the oil price comes down, very simply, Russia will settle. And the oil price is way down. You know, we got it way down. We're drilling and we produce more oil than anybody else in the world. We're doing a lot. But I was disappointed to see that. And the Prime Minister was disappointed to see that. And it wasn't him. It was other countries. And you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't. That's not playing fair with the United States. And we can't have that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that was President Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer speaking at a joint press conference, covered a range of topics from the war in Ukraine to the war in Israel. I would just point out one of the things that Trump said, Matt, the United States is doing better than it ever has done, and that the stock market has hit a new high. The president clearly having his Bloomberg terminal up on his phone, because we are indeed trading at a new high, and he says more to come.
Yeah, just ripping to new highs the day after the Fed decision. But maybe it's more about some of the deals President Trump has made. The U.S. acquired a 10% stake in Intel back at the end of August, and it looks like that may have had some impetus on Nvidia's decision to invest $5 billion in Intel. And that has driven Nvidia stock up as well as Intel. So you've got a big tech movement today. The NASDAQ moving even higher than the S&P 500, or powering ahead at a stronger pace. But you've got at the same time yields that came down substantially yesterday and have bounced on jobless claims today. So even with a 12 basis point gain in the 10-year yield, the stock market still posts a new high on an intraday level. And if it closed here, it would be at a high on that level as well.
Yeah, this is not a market trading on the Fed. It is a market trading on tech deals. Let's get more on that. Joining us now is Anne-Marie Hordern, Bloomberg's chief political correspondent and co-host of Bloomberg Surveillance. Anne-Marie, we heard there from the president and the prime minister didn't necessarily get new deals. What was your takeaway?
I would say both these men are coming out of these leaders, coming out of this joint press conference unscathed, in the sense that some of these topics could have really blown up in their face with potentially them disagreeing in front of the press. The president did at one point say, when it came to the conflict in Gaza, that it was on this score one of their few disagreements the two had. Of course, Keir Starmer, the prime minister, was asked about his recognition, which is set to happen this weekend, of a Palestinian state. And the president said it was this conflict in Gaza where they have a few disagreements, but he didn't go as far to, in front of the press, try to convince Keir Starmer to reverse course. So in that sense, these two leaders did seem to have this frank discussion in private. According to Keir Starmer, they had a one-on-one discussion for about an hour on a range of issues, but they came out relatively united in this press conference. There was a lot of news in this press conference that we should delve into, not just what is going on in terms of the Middle East, but also when it comes to Russia. The president basically said that Putin has let him down, really let him down. And the prime minister took the opportunity to say that when Donald Trump's put pressure on Putin, he does respond. The president said maybe some news shortly on that front.
All right. Anne-Marie Hordern, thanks very much. Wrapping up that press conference between the president and the prime minister. This is Open Interest. Bloomberg Tech is up next.